All right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Through Helping Back. Through Helping Back is a podcast focused on mental health issues, focused on issues related to psychology, human improvement, just making life a little bit better than the day before. That's the goal here. I am Jayson Pratt, CEO of A New Behavioral Health. I'm here with Miss Heather Perry. How are you, Heather?
I'm great, Jayson. Happy to be here. How are you?
I'm happy that you're here. I appreciate you coming in. I know that you're a busy person. You do a lot for us. You do a lot outside of work. So I'm glad you made time for us today. We have kind of an interesting, fun experience going on today. I'll let Heather talk about this a little bit. We were joking a couple minutes ago. We kind of have the Inception podcast going where we have a broadcast within a broadcast happening today. So tell us a little bit about that, Heather.
Right. So I figured I hadn't been on TikTok for a little bit, and my followers might appreciate a live because we've got a whole bunch of awesome information being spread around this room here. So I put on my live. If you feel like watching, it's at Nancy Steeler. But I'm basically just going to record the whole podcast from this angle. It's kind of a behind the scenes type thing. And you'll get the regular scene stuff.
Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. So are you on there a lot? Like, is that something you do on a regular basis with the live streams?
I used to do it a lot more frequently, but then I started working and adulthood took over, and now it's like a maybe sometimes.
Right. So we have producer Ian with us today, Ian Massoud. I appreciate you, Ian, for being here today. Ian's got some nice lo-fi going. Is that for us or is that for everybody? Is that going to hang in there in the background the whole time, or what do you think? We can do either one. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I like it. You
Options.
Yeah. Because I'm wondering if people can hear that when they're watching and things like that. If that's just for me and Heather to keep us calm and focused and on track. So.
Silent disco.
Right.
Cool, fun. I love it.
Yeah. So we're doing something else a little bit different today too. Typically on these podcasts, I will drive and kind of lead us through the topics on, last time we covered, how to be toxic, how to not be toxic, and toxicity, and I'll kind of, drive the conversation and lead people through. But today we're gonna switch it up a little bit. We're gonna let Heather drive. So hang on.
Buckle up.
Who knows where that goes? And part of that is because we're going to talk about overcoming negativity today. And we're going to talk about the use of solution-focused therapy. That's a style of therapy, a modality of therapy that I'm actually well-versed in. It's been the primary mode of therapy that I've used for over 20 years and have had good success with. So I wanted to bring that to the people and share with that. So Heather, I'll hand over the reins here. I'll hand over the steering wheel, and you take us through. So negativity, you've done some digging on the negativity side. I hope it didn't take you to any dark places on the internet. You can find some really negative things there. But what did you find, and what did you learn?
It seems that most of the population is actually unhappier these days than they are happy, and that's actually not that surprising to me. Just given everything that's been going on, it's super hard to cope with, in my opinion. So people are, more stressed and sad and worried and actually feeling less well rested. So that probably has a huge part of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said with all the things going on, and I'm interested, you had sent me this study before. I'm interested in learning a little bit about how they measured that and what they, how they got those readings. Right. But when you say well-rested, I think that's a point of order, so to speak, where we talk a lot about HALT, right? So do you remember what that means?
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
There you go. And so if you're feeling any of those things, if you're feeling hungry, right, so your biological needs are not getting met. You're feeling angry, you're in a heightened emotional state. It doesn't have to just be angry. It can be anxious, nervous. You're feeling lonely, right, which is an indication of isolation that's taking place in your life. Or you're feeling tired, again, a biological need. Sleep is so important. And that's what you mentioned. People are feeling less well-rested. Well, of course. Those things as far in terms of your self-measure of your state and your mental health is going to rise and fall in some degree in direct proportion with how good your sleep is and how regular, and so that's interesting, but predictable that well-rested would follow not feeling good. So how did they measure that? Did they just kind of walk around and say, hey, are you happy? Or what did they do?
Well, there was someone named Gallup who asked people from 122 countries So that's kind of a wide range.
Sure, it's a good start.
And that was in 2021. So what he was asking was if they had 5 different negative experiences on the day before the survey. So that's interesting. Like the day before. I mean, that seems like, yeah, easily. Like, of course I would have had 5. I don't know. That's just me.
Of course you would have 5?
Oh, yeah.
Like every single day you have 5 negative experiences?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me your 5 from yesterday.
From yesterday. Well, I was hungry for breakfast. That was a problem immediately.
That's a negative experience?
Negative, immediately.
Gotcha.
Like, no, can't deal with that.
Gotcha.
So I had breakfast, right?
Okay, yeah.
Have a solution.
They resolve them.
Oh,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
do.
Yeah, but you have a negative state. I get what you're
100%.
saying. Tell me the others. You got hungry again.
Yes. I got tired. And then, and I was a little bit bored.
Right.
Then I was stressed.
Right. So it's funny, like, no. It's funny that we're talking about this. Was it funny? Haha. It's funny weird, right? Like, it's funny you're talking like that because we're going to talk about exactly what just happened there where you were saying like, yeah, that's a negative experience. And then we're kind of laughing about it the day after, right? So your framing of those experiences is so key to what happens, right? Like, I'm feeling cranky is a little different than I'm always cranky. You know what I mean? So
I am cranky.
I'm a cranky person. So good. Okay. So, I mean, and then was there any, like, what else did they share? Because I see some data points there.
Well, what they found was that 4 out of 10 adults worldwide said they experienced a lot of worry, approximately 42%, or stress, about the same. And then slightly more than 3 in 10 experienced actual pain, like physical pain, 31%. That's kind of nuts. And then more than 1 in 4 experienced sadness, and slightly fewer experienced anger.
You'd mentioned at the beginning of the article, like, unsurprising. Like, from your experience, you're not surprised that those feelings the bad feelings are increasing, the positive feelings are dipping. That doesn't catch you off guard.
I feel like it has a lot to do with perspective. Like, just personally, like the other day, my perspective was a little weird on, some things, and it made them a lot worse in my head than it actually was. So, like, yes, there are things that are, like, happening, COVID and all that stuff. But that's kind of like, we're kind of coming out of that, right?
Are we?
I don't know.
We're not allowed. I don't know.
Right. I don't get it.
It does feel like people are ready to be over it. Whether we are over it, it's sort of like...
I thought now it was like the monkeypox.
Yes.
There's something else now, whereas this was yesterday.
It's funny, yeah. Well, it's funny, right? Like, everything gets its turn in the media cycle, right? So the last 2 years we've been living with the COVID thing, and
right.
You get a breath, and it's like, okay, maybe those numbers are going down. Certainly people aren't going to the hospital as much as they used to. And, maybe that's part vaccination, maybe that's part natural immunity, maybe that's part people... it was like the boogeyman at the beginning, right? Like, you've got it. Like, what does this mean for me? It's like a death sentence. So you rush to the hospital. But boy, as soon as we're done with that, monkeypox, which of all terrifying names.
I know. I'm like, what is that?
Right.
I've never heard of this.
Right. But be scared of it. You've never heard of it, but make sure you're scared of
right.
it. Yeah. So that's interesting. So, yeah, and it says it's the worst in record, like, since they've been doing the studies, since the Gallup group has done that. Do you think that's just pandemic related? Do you think that's fatigue? Like, why now? Why is it the worst now?
I feel like there could probably be a lot of reasons, but I don't know what they are because I don't. I don't go out enough. Like, I kind of just stay in my little shell and hear what is
But even in that shell, there's a sense that it's been bad out there and people are feeling discontented.
That's why I'm in the shell.
Right.
That's why I'm there.
The safe space?
Yes. Right in there.
The controllable space.
Don't need to know what's going on.
No, and I think it's interesting too. And I think a lot of it has to do with the conversation around it. I wonder, and you don't have to dig into it, but I wonder how long they've been doing the survey. I wonder if 50 years ago we were constantly walking around going, is everybody happy? Are you sad? Or is there more there's a lot of attention and a lot of what we'll talk about in the solution focus sense is your frame and seeing what you look for, right? And so it's interesting. I just wonder, is it that there's more or is it that there's more attention?
Right. I guess that's kind of what I was wondering too. And is it Oh, whoops, sorry. And is it like our like idea of what's happening too? Like, are we just not more sensitive, but like less acclimated to more difficult things? So smaller things might seem bigger now, if that makes any sense.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Well, because I mean, even getting into issues of upbringing and children and how we protect them now versus in the past, it was a little bit more free range kids. You go out, you get your bumps and bruises and you take risks. And now there's the helicopter parents, and now there's the like, oh my gosh, be careful. And,
right.
you know, I see these kids like riding bikes with like, like pro grade helmets and 50 pads on their elbows and a visor.
Right.
And it's like, dude, I think like the front tire of my bike like never even worked. It was like wobbly, and you like had to like to make it work. So we learn from those bumps and bruises. So maybe is it really an increase in danger or an increase in negativity, or is it a decrease in resilience?
That's
You know,
right?
maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know.
It could maybe a combination.
Because on the
of
flip
both.
side, kids these days are going through a lot tougher things than I did in elementary school. I didn't have to deal with a pandemic.
And other horrible things that happen way too frequently that should not.
For sure.
You know, so that's a lot to deal with.
All right, let's move on from this.
I know,
I'm already starting to feel bad.
I know. We're doing it. We're doing it right now.
We're feeling the pervasive nature of
No.
negativity because it's starting to get nasty.
We're not letting it get to us.
So what was your next one? Let's see that. So you go through a tough time and you recover, right? And you build back. But we're not getting that recovery time.
Right.
We're not getting that recovery time. That's a great comment. Whoever said that, that's very...
Daryl.
Daryl? Very astute comment, Daryl. We gotta get Daryl in here.
Right.
So. Okay, let's go on to the next.
Negative words dominate language. Have you heard anything about that before I even get into this?
Have I heard anything about negative words dominating our language? So I haven't heard anything in terms of like somebody, Daryl hasn't come up to me and whispered that. But what I would say as a therapist, I've seen that a lot. I've seen where people describe their situations, and obviously people going through some legitimate, like difficult situations. But even their self-talk is pretty terrible, to be really honest. If you think about it, the only person you're going to have a conversation with for your entire life is you. Right. And we talk to ourselves like crap. We are not nice to ourselves. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about like treat yourself like somebody that you were in charge of taking care of, right? Like a loved one.
Okay. I've always heard like a friend, like a best friend or something.
Right. And you wouldn't talk to them in the way that you talk to yourself. You wouldn't see their outfit and go, God, you look like crap today, or you're gaining weight, or what is wrong with you? Why do you keep doing this? You're so stupid. So I will say from a therapeutic level, yes, I am familiar with that concept of negative self-talk, because people are very rough on themselves. So
yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that correlates properly with my research.
Correlates
Jayson.
properly. Good.
It does,
good,
actually.
Good. I'm a big fan of proper correlation. Go on.
So another research was done in Mexico and Chicago. So Mexico City and Chicago, where I'm not like good with geography. Is that like?
One's north, one's south, one's, yeah. One's America, one's, yeah, there you go. One seems to be in Mexico. So.
Right, this is where they put that little thing on the screen. They're like, dude.
Right. But they're not neighbors, yeah.
No. Okay, so in both cities, 2 sets of participants, one in their 20s and the other in their 60s, were asked to jot down as many words as they could in 2 minutes that express emotion. 2 totally different age groups, like from different generations.
Different
like
areas, so see what they're doing. They're norming for location. There's some ethnicity in there, and they're norming for age at the same time.
And then, let's see. And then after that, they were asked to describe like if each emotion word that they thought of was like positive, neutral, or negative.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So.
And -1.
Well, unfortunately, it seems that half of all the words that people produce from their working vocabulary to express emotion are negative. So, yeah.
And how much was positive and how much was neutral?
So they were really close, actually. 30% was positive and 20 were neutral.
Gotcha. So out of 8 things that you say to yourself, 5 are likely to be negative, 3 are positive, and then you've got some neutral there.
See what I can come up with.
Is this properly correlated on the math? Yeah, 3, 2 plus 5. Yeah, come up with 10. So that's interesting, right? Because there, people have said in the past, or there's been this kind of idea out there that Eskimos have 100 words for snow, right? Because it's so important, to their existence. It seems that people in general have 100 words for bad.
Right.
Right. And not only do we have a lot of them, but they seem to carry a lot of weight when they pop up. There's something about, the impact of negative language on the brain, and it narrows our focus, more brain activity around it. Happy tends to relax and lower kind of brain activity sometimes, but negative gets our attention.
Right, because it's like there's a problem. Like happy means you can just chill. Everything's fine. Like there's no threat imminent. That's how I feel.
Well, and evolutionarily, right? Like, so you're cruising along. You've got your berries. Yeah. You've got your meat. You've got your shelter. You're okay. And then all of a sudden, there's a rustling from the reeds over there.
Right. And it could be like life or death, literally.
And this is a threat to my life, like immediately.
Yes.
So any sort of like negative state, it's got to be resolved like quickly, right?
Now, is that like, do you think back then that would have been a really good thing? Like all this anxiety, that would have been really good back then?
Well, yeah.
And it's just not necessary these days because we've got all this extra like locks on our doors and windows and...
Well, so what you're asking there is, do we have a toolkit with a lot of tools in it that we no longer need?
Right.
Right. And that's what anxiety is at the heart, is that you stay in a heightened state of alert, a perception of danger, a perception of negative, when it's not really, the threat's not really present, right? Because if nobody says they have anxiety in the war, right? They say like, you're in a war, like you're dealing with threats, right?
Right.
But if your city that you walk around in feels like a war zone to you, it's a misplaced emotion. You don't have to feel like that here. You're safe. So you're using tools that are not applicable to that current environment, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's good that they had that instinct. It's probably why we're sitting here, because they made it and they survived and they evolved. But is it as useful to us today as it was to folks thousands and thousands of years ago? No. And I think it's creating a lot of problems for us. And I think when you combine it with your previous study about negativity in media, people feeling like they're having more negative experiences, getting fed this feedback loop of negative over and over and over, it creates a tough condition to survive in sometimes. And that's why people develop anxiety disorders and even physical disorders, things that the body changes as a result of dealing with all this anxiety and being in a heightened state all the time. And then, disease and sickness can develop behind that because there's not that recovery. It's not that recovery period.
I feel like I heard that somewhere. Yeah. I did, but it's okay. We'll get to it.
Well, we get it, right? So was there anything else sort of like amazing out of that? Because...
So 37 different languages turned up 7 words that have very similar meanings.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I hadn't heard that. So tell me, what are those 7?
Oddly enough, they're joy, fear, anger, sadness, disgust, shame, and guilt.
Okay.
So that just sounds really like upsetting to me.
That's okay. Yeah. Well, so 7 out of the 8 are negative.
Yeah.
Or how many words were there? 7?
Or
7 words? 6 out of 7. Yeah, negative. 6 out of 7 are negative. Yeah. So that's interesting because how many? 37 languages?
Yeah.
So again, the universal predisposition is towards negativity. And it even shows up in how we form our language and how we develop it, because language is interesting. Like, remember last podcast, we were talking about the word toxic, and we were joking about Britney Spears, and since her, the use of the word toxic has gained a lot of utility. It's useful to us now. So it was like word of the year 8 years after that song or something like that. And people were, well, these words have been preserved and passed down. These are important words. That's why they exist in those 37 languages and haven't been pushed out by other more useful words. And those 7 are consistent across the languages. So they're very important.
It seems like they cover like all the basics too, as sad as that is. It's like, okay, joy is like all happy things, right? Like basically everything that makes you happy.
Sure.
Boom, done.
It's a joyful experience.
Right, but then there's all these different ways to feel bad, if that makes sense. Like you can feel guilty, but like maybe not angry. So
that's interesting in the sense of, why is it important for us to feel...
differentiate between...
Right, to feel specific types of bad. Right? There's a reason for that, right? So maybe it's about identifying threats. So if disgust is a different type of threat than pain. Right. So pain could be a threat to your body. Disgust is like, I just don't like that.
Yeah.
Right? I want to avoid that. Right. But
Which
they're
could
both
be
bad.
that could be like what's that? Not chemical warfare, but like things that you can't see that could keep you healthy if you don't go near the gross thing.
That's right. It's an avoidance, right? An avoidance of eat that, you'll get sick. You're not sick now, but eat, you're fine. You're good. Ian's got you well trained now on the mic, so very good. He's doing a backflip over there. So that's interesting. So maybe it's about coping. Maybe it's about I need to know with some specific nature what kind of bad I'm dealing with, so I can employ the necessary coping skills to address that bad. Whereas if I'm happy.
Right.
I don't need to cope with that. I can just, exist with that.
This is great. Like, I'm just going to eat more berries and lounge under my whatever. I'm picturing like a tiki hut.
You're gonna eat berries in a tiki hut, and that's where you're lounging?
Yeah.
I could see that.
That's where
I can see that.
feeling that.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because I was talking with somebody the other day, and they made the comment I thought was really profound, that people feel like happy should be their automatic state, right? So, like, lack of happy is identified as a problem. Right. But if you think about it on terms of a bell curve, right? So you've got like the outliers, the things that don't happen as much. And then you've got your normal state that happens more in the middle, tends to form a bell curve. Out here is like unhappy and sad and depressed and anxious, right? But it's not the norm. Like more people are not that than are, right?
Typically, usually like day to day?
Typically, yeah, right. Do you think more people have anxiety disorders or don't have anxiety disorders?
I feel like more do.
You feel like more do? I think that's a sample bias.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe more people
True.
Right? Maybe in your world that's true. But on the spectrum, right?
Like,
with
is
everybody,
it a fact?
It's less, right? So, it's a lower percentage. So we want happy to be in there in the predominant space, but it's actually over here, right? Sometimes you're happy and it feels really good and you're joyful and we appreciate it when you're joyful. Sometimes you're unhappy. Most of the time, you're okay. Like in the middle is like you're just okay. And so for a lot of people who deal with this, the idea is like, well, if I'm unhappy, I have to be happy all the time. But that's not how day-to-day life works. Most of the time, you're okay. You're content, right? And then you have these periods of being happy, right? Like think about some of your happiest moments. And for me, seeing my children for the first time and things like that. Yeah. If I felt like that every day, how exhausted would I be?
Right. Oh my God.
Right?
I'm so happy.
I wake up at my breakfast, I'm like, yes, scrambled eggs. My heart explodes. Like, no, that's not how it works, right? So a lot of it has to do with how we are managing our expectations of that. Doesn't mean you should settle for being less happy. It just means like the normal human experience is a lot of okay, some bad, some really good. You know what I mean? And so to walk around and go, well, that really good is like 20% of my experience, but I'm looking for it. I want to feel it 100% of the time. It's not homeostasis. It's not how we operate, right?
Man.
Yes. And even that reaction, you're taking happy away from me. Like, no. It's the normal
my forever
range.
happiness.
But all you're speaking to, and moving on from this, because your articles, we're not going to let Heather do research anymore, because this is some really bad. I feel
so
like I'm into that negative stuff, But but what we're talking about there is what's termed a negativity bias, right? Where when people receive information, the negative is more powerful. The negative is more long lasting. Our default setting is a negative interpretation, right? So if somebody doesn't talk to you, more often than not, you'll think, right?
They hate
me, right? But not they're busy, not they're doing other things, not that this doesn't mean anything. It's like, oh gosh, something must be wrong, right? And so like in leadership, we talk about the power of communication, and it's how it's really important to communicate with people a lot of times. And often, like the best way to communicate is often. And the reason is because without that communication, people fill in the blanks with negative stuff.
True.
Right? That's a negativity bias. And so that's all that we're talking about there, but we can put that to bed.
Right.
And I think, we're good. We're good there.
The head of that.
Yeah.
Be gone with you.
So moving on. So what's the antidote? Like, so what do we do about that? And I think that's, kind of the primary topic for today is what are the different approaches and how do we deal with that?
Well, that's pretty much the only reason we have you, Jayson.
Yeah.
That's the only reason, is to solve this problem.
Is to solve that problem?
That's it.
As a therapist, I've heard that many times throughout my life. The only reason I'm here is for you to fix this and get me out of here.
Exactly.
So I'll do what I can. Yeah.
But what have you found in, how long have you been doing this again?
As far as therapy?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm coming up on 20 years. I mean, I say 20 years of therapy. I'm trying to think. So 2005 was when I was first fully licensed, and you were probably being born, and I was finishing my grad school. And
well, I was crawling.
You were crawling. Good.
Yep.
Well, I wasn't competent to work with children then, so. No, but yeah, so almost 20 years. I've been working in some type of therapeutic context.
So throughout that time, and all of these methods that I'm sure you've tested, what are among the best or some of the most effective that you've found?
Yeah, so that's the great question, right? So one of my foundational beliefs, or at least maybe it's what I've learned, maybe it's not even a belief, but one of my foundational beliefs at this point is that therapy, counseling, all the healing sciences are actually healing arts.
I like that.
It is absolutely an art. And what's funny is there's like this scientification of the helping professions that I think has yielded some really good results, right? Like we're going through all of these things and saying like, okay, X percentage of the time people get better by this percentage. But it doesn't really seem to be predictive, right? So in real science, you mix A plus B, boom. Or you mix A plus C, oh, it worked. And it does that every single time.
And that's why it's a science, and not the theory or something, right?
That's a hard science. They call that the hard sciences, and I grew up in the soft sciences, right? So, which I think it's a mistake. I think we're in the hard arts. It's the hard science and the hard arts, not the soft science and the hard science. So, to your question of what is the best, it is incredibly personal and individualized to each specific client and their situation. So I'll give you one specific example. So some of the common ones out there, right, like cognitive behavioral therapy is a great approach, and a lot of people use it. I've been trained in it. I'm a big fan. But it deals with cognitive distortions. It deals with thinking errors, right? So that's a whole nother episode. But
I feel like I have so much of that.
Yeah, well, right. Something bad, I must have it. Yeah. So, black and white thinking would be one common cognitive distortion. Everything's great or it's awful, right? I'm good or I'm bad. And not allowing that nuance of life to work its way in there, and that sense of okay, over personalizing, things like that. But what if I'm working with somebody who doesn't necessarily have one of those cognitive distortions? Or what if I'm working with somebody whose needs are different? Or what if I'm working with somebody who kind of has a sense that they've been engaging in thinking errors, but now they're ready to do something different about it, right? Well, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I'm going to say, let's talk about your distortions. I have a worksheet, and there are and I don't mean to demean or diminish cognitive behavioral therapy. I use it a lot. Very effective, well studied, a lot of good results. So there's other things. There's person-centered, right? Being unconditional positive regard. There are dialectical behavioral therapies. I mean, there are a lot of different schools of thought on how to approach this. For me, solution-focused therapy or solution-focused brief therapy is my foundation. And the reason is I think it has the greatest potential to help the largest number of people. It's the broadest brush that I can paint with in those arts, right? Because no matter what the situation that developed your problem, you're looking for a solution. You want things to improve. And so I use solution-focused therapy. That's been the anchor. It's typically where I start. Now, we may branch off if there's other needs. I mean, that's kind of what the art of this is. But it's such a great question that you ask as far as what's best. Because as a person who's looking for therapy, that's all you want to know.
Right. Like, what's going to be the quickest, like...
Right. And what I would say is if you find a practitioner who uses solution-focused therapy, you have your best shot at getting to your solution in a timely fashion. And they tend to be the more flexible approach, that if you have other needs, they can flex the approach and use those other techniques to meet those needs.
Like a quote, like I heard, be firm in your decision, but flexible in your approach.
That's That's excellent. Where did you hear that? Was that in your negativity research? Where you
Somewhere in there.
No. That's nice.
So like you always know where you're going, but you can go different ways. It's totally fine if you take a little detour, a little spin around. Just make sure you know where you're going.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about solution finding and exceptions and how to develop your solutions. But they can be different for even the same person, based on where you are in your life or what you're facing or where you are mentally. From day to day, those solutions can change. So I think you need to employ a flexible approach and give some grace and be able to paint with that broad brush to where like, okay, and then there's a little nuance to it, right? You know, because maybe it's a little gray on the edges or maybe it's a little pink in the sky, but that's what I'm feeling today. So that works for me today. So,
or like if you judge it before it's done, you're like not going to like it. You have to wait till it's done. Like don't ever judge your painting halfway through. Just don't do it. You're going to think you're the worst artist ever and you're never going to paint again. You must wait.
And yet, we walk around in our heads as judgment machines. We talk about that conversation we had with ourselves. We beat ourselves up on a daily basis, you know? And so that's interesting. So the quotes are very flowery and sweet and nice, right? The application is, I don't think we live like that very often.
No. It's just, it's nice to think.
So to answer your question, mine is solution-focused therapy is my primary, and I don't know if it's best, but it's been the most useful.
So what do? You like start somewhere and work your way back, or you like, how do you do this? How do you do this solution stuff?
How do you do solution focused therapy? Yeah, so let's do a master's degree in 5 minutes.
Fast to get it done.
So
I'm just kidding.
The first thing about it, before we get into what you do in terms of techniques, right, is your mindset around solution focused therapy. So how you approach your client, how you approach problems will really lay the foundation for how you intervene, right? Or how you don't intervene, because that's important too, right? So some of the foundational beliefs about somebody who employs solution-focused therapy is that if you want to find a solution, it's not necessary to explore the problem in great depth. It is necessary to explore potential solutions in great depth, right? And so that's kind of a weird thing in the diagnostic world we live in. Even when we've talked here today, we've talked about depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress. Everything's got a label, right? And what I find is a lot of times when people come into therapy, they want to talk about the problem to the exclusion of all else, because that's what brought them there, right? They're not usually coming to see me because life is so great, right? They're usually, you don't go to a mechanic because the car's running so well just to say, hey, dude, I want you to know, like, it's going great, you know? Right. Rev your engine a little bit. No, so what happens is in typical and sort of diagnostic-based approaches is we really dive into that problem in great depth. You know, tell me about your childhood and when you first felt this. Hold on. So is there a before and after point? So is there any triggering event, or when's the first time you recall it all going wrong, right? And there's value to that. I'm not saying that processing doesn't have its value, but to the exclusion of the solution, to the exclusion of the depth. And we don't give equal weight. Some people spend years talking about the problem. That's what fell apart with Freudian psychoanalysis. So Freud would put these people on the couch for years, right? And it's free association, and they're over here and I'm back here sketching, and you're just whatever comes to mind. And it's like boom, boom, boom. And the joke about, Freudian psychoanalysis was like, okay, you spend 2 years on the couch, you figure out it's your mother's fault, right? And now you have to do something about it, right? With solution-focused therapy, we approach it with, let's not do the 2 years.
Yeah. Can we just
right?
not?
Let's get to the part of like, what am I going to do about this, right? So you definitely invest enough in the problem to learn how it's affecting people and what issues it's causing. But we're not archaeologists. We don't want to dig and get to the real root and core, because there's not a lot of utility in that.
Right, just kind of like breaks it open, feels like, makes it hurt again.
Oh, you're bleeding? Here, let me scratch that scab off for you every week for an hour. And then you come back and tell me why you're still hurting, So that's one of the foundational beliefs, right? Like, it's like we don't have to invest a lot in the problem. The other one, and this is where people kind of, struggle with it too, is you have to have a firm belief that the client is the number one expert on their situation, their problems, and their solutions, right?
I like that.
And what do you like about that?
That I could be the expert at something.
Yeah. Well, you're living that life day in, day out. You don't feel like you're the expert as is?
Maybe I am, but I like to, practice humility.
It must be tough. No, I know it's
extremely difficult.
No, but think about what you just said and how powerful it is for somebody who is like struggling with drug addiction, right? And everybody's told them that they're a fuck up. Everybody's told them that they're a junkie. Everybody told them that they're disappointment and they're, a disappointment to the family, and you've embarrassed and you're ruining everybody's life. And, and that old school kind of moral thought about you're a bad person because you're giving into the devil's temptations with the drugs. And why don't you just be tougher and stronger, have better willpower, right? And then you sit down with somebody who's supposed to be the expert and fix this for you. And they say that. They say, I couldn't possibly know. Like, you tell me, you're the expert on your life. Like, what has worked for you? And it's like that first moment sometimes of hearing like, I'm capable. Like, I'm powerful. I am in control here, right? Because somebody who's suffered through 10 years of drug addiction and made it to me has not failed for 10 years. They have successfully survived a life-threatening condition for 10 years and made the damn appointment, found a way to pay for it, got here, right? So the success of someone walking through that door going, I've been struggling with addiction or anxiety or depression for 10 years. My first inclination to that is not to dig in and go, wow, 10 years. Tell me about all the struggle. It's like, wow, how'd you do that? How to do what? How to do drugs? No, how'd you get here? Because I couldn't do that. I could not live their life probably for one day. Right. And
to turn it around and make it positive like that just immediately off the bat is so different, because the first thing you want to do is sympathize with them. Be like, oh my God, tell me. Let me get in there and soak with you. That must be so difficult. Right. Yeah. But that's a trap for everyone at that point. I mean, it's so much more useful and productive to just immediately.
Right. When I focus on my problems increase. When I focus on my solutions increase. When I focus on my failures, my failures increase. When I focus on my strengths, right? That's kind of what weaves in with the solution is the strengths. Then those increase. So it's fun. It's a softer way of doing it, but it's also really kind of heartbreaking because you can see that look on people's face for the first time. They're like I can do this. Like, I'm good. So that's another foundational belief. The other thing is that you really don't overthink it too much in solution focused therapy. If something works, you do more of it. If something's not working for you, stop.
Cool. Okay.
Right. So it seems like very kind of like no shit. Like, I get it. Right. And yet we go out there and just kind of keep repeating those same mistakes over and over. So there's a little bit of pattern interruption that comes in there. It's like, we're just gonna work on what works.
That's so hard. Pattern interruption. Oh my God. That's a whole other one.
We are creatures of habit. Right. But that's the WOW, WOWW, to solution focused therapy. Let's work on what works. Right. I have a problem. When's the last time you didn't have that problem, and what were you doing then? Oh, I was doing this. Go do that.
Right. That's the part where I feel stupid. I'm like, I just had to stop and think about it for a second.
And it takes session after session to break those patterns. There's work involved. But on the base level, it's like, oh, okay, cool. How was your weekend? Oh, it was bad. Why was it bad? I did this thing. Cool. Let's not do that anymore. Yeah. Right? Let's stop the bad. Right? Let's stop the non-productive, and let's just kind of invest in the things that are productive.
Easier said than done, of course.
Easier said than done, right? And that's where the skill comes in. Though one of the other foundational beliefs, though, is that we're always looking for the difference that makes a difference. And so, a little history lesson for folks: when we originally launched this podcast, it was called "The Difference That Makes the Difference."
I like that too.
Yeah, it's just wordy. It's kind of hard to
Yeah, it's a lot.
And try putting it on a website. It's like impossible. People can find it. So, but that's what it is, right? Because not all interventions, not all solutions are equally weighted, right? Like, I went to the gym and I felt a little better. I spent time with my family members. I felt a lot better. Let's do that one. That's, what is the smallest amount of effort that you could do, that you would do, that would make the biggest difference, right? And so that's what we're looking for is like, what are those like small steps, but that have big impact, big gains for you.
And that's very different from the should. That is very different, right?
Yeah, so that's such a bad word, right?
I do that badly.
Well, so let's talk about that. Like, how can should be a problem?
Well, in your opinion, yeah. For me personally, it feels like we go back to the whole like being hard on yourself thing. So I immediately think I should do all these other healthy things. Like, I should eat like my eggs and bacon in the morning and then have like a smoothie and go for a run. And then I should like do all that. But like, how tangible, how realistic, like, do I even want to? Why do I want to do that? Like, what's going on,
Yeah, and maybe this is the young oppositional defiant child in me that has never died. But who says you should? Why should you do that? Where did should come from?
But that's true though, but because really, whoever stopped and said you should do this, or did we just gather that idea over time based on experiences, things we've seen, whatever? Like,
who is the ultimate expert on your experience?
I'd have to say the one having the experience, right?
You.
Yeah.
So why am I allowed to give you a should? Right? How could I possibly know more? How could I possibly know better?
Right. I feel like it's easy to get into the trap of thinking like, oh, well, this person appears like they have such a good life and they appear like they have it all together, so it appears like I should take their advice.
Yeah, and this is not to say that we don't learn from other people and we don't take hints and we don't investigate, but you have to personalize that. You
right.
have
You
to
can't
make
just
it your
take
own.
it at face value and
Right.
say.
Because if it's not impactful for you, it just won't last. It won't work, right? It won't be the difference that makes the difference for you. So anyway, that's a pretty long-winded answer to your original question of like, what do you do?
Right.
In solution-focused therapy. But I think it's important because so much of the work of solution-focused therapy is done in the perspective and the mindset before you even get into the session or engage with the client. Because those are the type of thoughts and that's the mentality that will color all of your interactions with them. If I believe the client is the expert, I'm less likely to judge their behavior. And if I'm less likely to judge their behavior, those little involuntary, paraverbal, nonverbal, I'm not going to be sending those signals that you don't know what the hell you're doing and you need a lot of help, which is then going to empower you and build your confidence and which is what you want, right? Like I'm in a weird business. Like I don't want repeat customers. If I do my job right, I become completely unnecessary, right? And so the more I can feed you, the less necessary I become, right? And the more I can empower you and the more you develop your skills, like it is great when you stop coming weekly. Right? Because you're doing well. It's awesome when you come once a month. It's even better.
I love seeing that for clients. I really do. Like when they just bump down on the schedule a little bit, I'm like, the frequency changed. Good for them.
Yes, yeah. Especially if it's their choice.
Exactly.
Right? I'm getting what I need. Life is a buffet. I take what I need. I leave the rest for everybody else.
Someone the other day said that was my last session. I'm all good. I was like, good for you, girlfriend.
I mean, throw a party,
yeah,
right? Like how big is that?
Right.
That's a wow moment. You're always looking for those wow moments. Like, and then right behind that is, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? How did you do that? Right? And they have to answer that question by not bragging, but kind of like hyping themselves up. Like, well, here's what I did. And it reinforces my individual competence.
And that'll be different for everyone. Be different for everyone.
Has to be.
That's why the should doesn't work. Because
has to be.
What they did might not work for you.
And should's just so action-packed with judgment. Like, get out of here with your shoulds. You know what I mean? Like, take your shoulds and you just get out of here with your shoulds. Again, all that stuff flares up as says who, says, why,
Right.
why should, you know what I mean?
Triggered.
Yeah. Right. I'm having my moment here, but it's like, yeah, no, we try not to invest in the shoulds. A could is nice. What could you do?
Right, the woulds and the coulds,
What
like
could
you were saying.
What would you do? Yeah.
I was talking about that with my mom, actually.
Okay.
We were making plans because she's like, oh, I am going to do this. I am going to do that. She was like avoiding the should. I'm like, okay, when? Like, when are we doing this, Mom? Like, can you tell me where we're doing this?
Look at you putting specific action steps and accountability into these nice ideas.
I was so proud of myself. Then she's like, oh, okay, all right. Like,
So you've got the mindset down. What else would you like to know, or what else are you curious about when it comes to this?
so how would one, asking for a friend, apply this technique or, things of the similar nature to like depression or anxiety? Like, what do you do in that case when it's just a little bit? Like, it's not, this like extreme or, it's just my day is not right. Like, what do I?
Yeah. So there are specific techniques, right? And so when you say like asking for a friend, I will say, right on the heels of saying we don't want repeat customers, I would say it is best to start this process with somebody who's trained in solution-focused therapy, because there are specific techniques, and taking you through that till you master those and kind of become automatic, is important, because
it's not the first thought to be that positive.
It's not. And that's the trap people fall into with solution focus. It's like, well, it's just all positive and it's like sunshine and rainbows, and it's bullshit, because not every life is not like that.
Right.
It's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is how you approach those potentially negative situations and reframe them is reframing is a huge part of this, right? So when you think about techniques, so there's a miracle question, which I'll do with you here in a second, right? A miracle question, right?
I love it.
Yeah. There are coping questions, there's exception questions, learning how to scale properly and learning how to reframe. Those are kind of the core tenets, right? So scaling's a big one, right? Because there's where you identify your progress, right? So as far as a miracle question goes, and that's funny because you kind of like, wow, ooh, a miracle question.
Right.
That's actually how you should approach that. So you've got a client who comes in and they say like, I'm dealing with all these problems, whatever the problem may be. And this is one of those foundational techniques. It doesn't solve anything by itself, and you'll see that here in a second. It's what you do with the answers. So if we could kind of do this in real time. So what the miracle question is this. You say, okay, listen, I've heard you come in and I've heard you explain all these things that are going wrong, and we're going to work on that. But before we do, I want to ask you a question, and it's kind of a strange question, all right? It takes a little bit of thinking to kind of get through it. So if you're ready, would you like to hear it, right? So right now I'm handing, you're like, yeah, I'm building a little suspense. So you're the expert, you're in charge. Are you ready? Okay, yeah. All right, so the question is this. So let's say that tonight you go home, all right? You have a normal night and you get ready for bed. You go through all your routines and all you normally do. You've had the exact same experiences. And you go to bed, you fall asleep, all right? And during this sleep, all the things that you've been struggling with, all these worries that have been on your mind, you can pick a problem: depression, anxiety. I'm fighting with my boyfriend. I'm mad at my boss. I have to do podcasts on the weekends. All that bullshit that gets in the way of our life, right?
Not
mandatory. Okay, all these things that brought you here, they're all resolved. They're fixed. And not only are they fixed, they're fixed in exactly the way that you would want them to be resolved. So they're fixed to your specifications, right? Client is the expert, your specifications, right? The trick is, because it happens while you're asleep, you have no knowledge that these changes have happened. So it's all been fixed without you even knowing. So you're going to wake up to this ideal existence, but you don't know you're waking up to that ideal existence because it happened while you were sleeping. Okay?
So you're not like having this dream.
You're not having a dream. You're having your normal sleep. All the changes are happening. All your problems are resolved.
But you don't know this.
Like magic. Boom. But you don't know it. You wake up with no knowledge of it.
Okay.
But you wake up to it all fixed. Okay?
Like in real life.
In real life.
Okay.
What would be the first thing that you would notice as being different if that happened?
My bed would probably be a lot comfier.
You'd feel more comfortable in your bed.
Yeah.
Why would you feel more comfortable in your bed?
So like I think that we got the wrong like thickness of mattress or something. I got a purple mattress and we had to get it from the warehouse and they gave me like the wrong one or something. And so like my back hurts every single night. It's really stiff. And so I think I'd have like a really fluffy bed in like my dream world.
So you would have slept better.
Yeah.
You'd feel refreshed. I'm in a comfortable surrounding. I feel more comfortable in my surroundings, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what would be next? Since you wake up, you're feeling more comfortable. What would you do?
Oh, I'd get up and then there'd be like fresh air coming in through these like big open windows.
Gotcha.
And there'd probably be like a buffet of like pineapples.
Gotcha.
And nice like tropical yummy fruits. And then like protein because you have to have that.
Yeah, you seem really psyched about that with protein. Yeah.
Whatever, healthy things. And then do I keep going?
Yeah. Well, so I mean, right off the bat, I'm hearing that you're sleeping better.
Yeah.
You're waking refreshed.
Yeah.
You've got. We talk about the buffet and everything. And that's awesome, right? Like it's kind of like fantasy island, right? But you'd have good food choices available to you.
Yes.
Right.
Available to me is the key.
Fresh air. So again, healthy surroundings. Okay. And so you're fueled by a nice, night of good sleep. You're fueled by this better dietary choices. You're fueled by this fresh air. And so what would be the first thing you would do in this new ideal life?
That feels like such a dumb moment. When you say it like that, I feel like, duh. Like,
so here we go, right? So we don't have to go all the way through. We don't have to fix Heather on the spot. It takes more than one session to fix Heather, I promise. But you see where we're going already, right? So we start with this kind of grandiosity or like that. But what we're moving to is we're shrinking the change little by little. So where you end with a miracle question session is those small steps that you could do, okay? So you may not be able to go out, and by the way, you came in with depression and anxiety and fighting with other people, and now we're talking about all these things that you are in control over, right? So whether your boyfriend or your girlfriend is a jerk, you can control what you eat, right? And whether, you can get good sleep hygiene in place and you can sleep better. You can get to, healthy, the fresh air where you get to a place where you're feeling more refreshed. And
that part's easy.
And we were going to, when you say the dumb moment, you were going to say something along the lines of you were going to go do something healthy, right?
Off to get the fruit. Off to go outside.
Right. So tomorrow, no matter how bad your situation is, you can do one or two of those things as if the miracle had already occurred.
So crazy.
And that's the miracle question. It flips everything from this, I've got these huge problems that I'll never unravel because it took me years to develop them, right? And it gets you down to like drinking fresh water and going to the gym, but you're contributing to your miracle. You're building your miracle situation in reverse, right? And so because you get the fresh water, because you go to the gym, your body's functioning better, you sleep better. Because you sleep better, you wake up and go, hey, this feels kind of like my miracle. Because your miracle is starting to happen, you're empowered, you're feeling more confident. I'm building this. What else? What else could I build? It's kind of like that, right? You manifest that, yeah?
It's kind of like that, except more scientific and more like
it's just action oriented. It's just small steps and action oriented. So that's one of the have-tos, right? And so that's why I say you work with a solution focused practitioner. You want to get your miracle scenario ironed out. And you should probably do this every couple weeks because it'll change, right? Once you get all that stuff in place. And we're not saying anything. I mean, it may be like I would feel less scared. I would go out of the house. I would talk to my mom. I would actually take a shower. I would put on clothes that make me feel good about my body. It's not all physical. Sometimes it can be emotional things. I would take time to journal because I'd have that time. Or
reach out to potential friends.
I'd be less stressed because my kids wouldn't be driving me crazy. And because I'm less stressed, I would write for a while because I've always wanted to be a writer, right? It's like, okay, cool, let's write for 5 minutes, right? Like there's things you can control. It's always shrinking that change, always working it down to that. So the other technique that you're going to employ a lot is with like they're called coping questions. Coping questions assume competence, and they bring that competence into reality and make it clear to the individual that they are already coping with this. They're already finding a way to deal with it. It may not be the best way, but they're already demonstrating that expertise and they're already demonstrating the ability to manage this. So with any problem, you can bring up anything. You can say like, I'm struggling with.
What if you're a single mom?
Okay, you're a single mom. And because you're a single mom, what are some of your struggles?
I mean, I wouldn't know, but maybe like you don't have much time on your hands. You feel like your youth got ripped away from you.
I mean, shit, that went deep fast. You're like, I need more time, and my youth has been ripped from me. No, you're right. You're going to feel all that stuff under the iceberg, right? So instead of like, wow, that must be difficult, which is a very affirming thing to say. Wow, you must. My take on that would be like, wow. So I hear that you're short on time. I hear you're stressed out. I hear that you're maybe not happy with how your life has unraveled to this point. How are you able to do that and maintain a job? Invest in yourself through a therapeutic relationship. I've seen your kids, you're raising them, so you're raising others. It's like, wow, you're already very successful. It's like, no, and it's funny because people will fight with you. Like, no, I'm having problems.
I'm losing my job.
I'm having a lot of problems, right? But you haven't yet. Today, you're okay, right? And there have been a lot of todays leading up to today that you've successfully managed. Right, like I saw some like little trite like live, laugh, love sign that was like, "You've survived 100% of your bad days to this point." Right?
That's a cheesy quote, but sometimes I think of it. I'm like, it's a fact.
That's the thought behind coping questions. And in your answer, when you tell me how you've coped, you're going to reveal to me a lot of strengths. You're going to reveal to me a lot of successful interventions that are already taking place. Right? Like, wow. And then back to our fundamental belief: if it's working, do more of it. If it's not, let's get rid of that, right? So I tell you 3 things that help me cope, but then I go spend time with my crappy boyfriend and that makes me feel worse. Let's do the things that are making you feel better more often. Then let's worry about the other stuff,
What would you say to someone who is in a situation where maybe like they're addicted to something and they have seemingly less control over not doing the bad things? Like, what would you...
So, and caveat to all of this, right? Like there are biological needs. There are like heavy psychiatric needs. Like I'm not going to go to somebody who's actively schizophrenic and go, wow. Like there have to be medical interventions. There have to be, and so that's one thing where you talked about like what's best it's different for every person because there has to be some measure of stability. However, in things like with suicidal clients, homicidal clients, solution-focused therapy has shown to be really effective because if I'm dealing with somebody who's actively suicidal, I'm dealing with somebody who has struggled with feelings of hurting themselves but hasn't done it. Why not? I mean, here's a really scary question, but like I'm thinking about killing myself. Why haven't you done it yet? It's like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Are you daring me to do it? Right? Are you daring me to? No, right. I'm noticing that despite these feelings, you have found a reason to stay alive for one more day, for 100 days, 365 days. How long have you been struggling with this? And how have you been so successful in not following through and finding other ways to cope with it? And they'll begrudgingly say like, well, so I'll play with my dog and I refocus on I don't want my dog to miss me or, I think I don't want my mom to miss me. And now you've got some success to mine. Wow. So you care about that. Let's talk more about that.
Okay. Right.
The other thing is in the next technique I would talk about is exception questions, right? So when you talk about addicts, so when you get this person's like, look, I'm not being successful, they will fight you. They really will. Like people really like the negative, right? They're like, you're not going to tell me everything's okay. I'm here. Things suck and I need help. You help me right now because this is a big problem.
It's almost more comfortable to be in that like misery. Like, nope, I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to, be in my, self-loathing and nothing's going to fix it. But like,
because I know this, I know how this works, right? The familiar is always more comfortable in the initial than the dark that's out there, right?
Only
Anything
initially.
Can be out there. Only initially. But even in those cases, what they tend to use is like black and white language, always, never, And what I would say is like, well, not always, right? There's a gentle challenge there. So like, I'm always getting high. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because there's 24 hours in a day. And if you were high for 24, you're not actively using every single day. And even if you are, there's some days that are a little bit less.
Are you counting sleep? Like sleep, right? Because you choose to sleep,
you can
right?
find it all over the place, right? You've used, and even when you first started using, you were using less, and your tolerance developed and everything like that. So the exception thing is basically what is different when the problem isn't present or isn't present in the levels that are like the worst. Because by definition, if it's the worst, it's the top of the level. So everything below that is not the worst. So, I mean, I'm 100 on a scale of 0 to 100. My drug problem is 100. I'm great. Has it ever been 99? Has it ever been 98? Have you ever been 1% more stable? Well, I mean, yeah, obviously there's moments. I want to talk all day about those moments.
Yeah.
Right? Tell me about that. When is it different? When is it not? Which is an inverse of the traditional model of give me your triggers.
Focus on all that.
When is it bad? All those feelings that cause you to use. Let's talk for days about all those feelings about, rumination, is a big deal, right? And so let's talk forever about when the problem is there and how, terrible that must be. Instead, it's like, I want to talk about that one moment when it wasn't, or the moment before it was, and who was that person and what were you doing then? And what piece of that was the smallest piece of that you could do, that you would do, that that would make a difference today? Well, when I hang out with this person, they're really religious, so I do feel uncomfortable and I don't use around them. Now we're back to the coping. Wow. So hold on. Even though you have this massive drug problem, you're able to refrain from using because of who's in the room. You may have a lot more control over this than you ever realized. And then you just sit and like, oh shit, yeah, right? Maybe I can make some choices here. And the cool thing about solution-focused approach is you don't have to make all the choices. You just have to make one. One tiny step in the right direction is like a high five sufficient moment. Because that's how you got into the negative situation, was one tiny step at a time, right? And so so that would be my answer to that. When you say like addicts, I'm really on the hunt for when it's not happening or when they're doing different things. Because most problems, I'd say, I want to be careful unless it's like a diagnostic, situation where, there's a physical malfunction with the brain or there's actual disorder there. Like I said, the schizophrenia, a wiring issue. Most things are not all. Most things are not never, right? And so let's find those. Let's find those moments and harvest those and build some strength around that. The other thing is, if you really want to fight me and go, no, dude. Always. Yeah. Always, right?
Because there are people who will do stubborn.
Sure. And you can have it because you're the expert. I believe you. Then you want to scale, right? Okay. All right. So now you can project success. So on a scale of 1 to 10, whether it be addiction or isolation, what with 10 being the absolute worst, 1 being the best, where are you on that scale? I'm a 10. I'm a 10, 100%. I promise you I'm a 10. Great. What would a 9 look like? What would an 8 look like? If you're not experiencing it right now, now we're back to our miracle scenario. If it did get better,
love that.
What would it look like?
Wicked cool.
Right?
Okay.
So now I have to take the time to envision a world where that problem is just a little bit better. Right? And of course, you already know the follow-up question is going to be, okay, so when you get to that 9, what will you be doing differently?
Right.
Now, keep putting it back into your hands in terms of action and what you can do about it. Because ultimately, that's what people want to leave with. They want to leave with something I can do. I'm going to try this, right? And you're going to come back next week and you say, that sucked. That didn't work at all. Okay, gone. But you're here, right? Because you got here, right? So, all right. So you didn't have the exact same week. What was different? What was better? What was going on when it was better? What were you doing differently? So scaling is really important in this. Scaling yourself all the time, measuring on like 1 to 10, and because, that's one of those black and white kind of mistakes where people go, it's got to be all better before I'll acknowledge it's better. That's not true. If you're at a 10 and you go down to an 8, it's 20% improvement. Like you're on your way. Like that's a big deal. 8 to 10 doesn't feel massive. It's 20%. And if you went from 10 to 8, I bet you could go from 8 to 6. And what would a 6 look like? And what would you be doing? Over and over and over, right? And you're just constantly and you're way too young for this, but there was that old like Columbo show where like it was a detective and he always acted very confused, but he was actually kind of guiding the people towards the like answer to the mystery. And that's what you're encouraged to do, is just kind of be that always, because that's another thing that's really important, is a not knowing stance. If you're presenting yourself as the expert and you're in a solution-focused session, you're not really doing solution-focused therapy, because who's the expert? The client's the expert, right? So if it's you ought to do this, you've kind of lost your way a little bit like that. What would it look like if you tried this? Is different, because now I've handed it to you. What do you think about that, right? And you're always just kind of this sort of like, wonder if. What would it look like? Has it always? You're kind of not playing dumb, but you're letting them lead, and you're being not knowing. You're kind of being a blank slate for them to kind of put all that stuff on and sort out what works and doesn't work for them. So,
and it does take like a certain amount of like self-reflection and like time, and like you can't just continue what you're doing and pretend like everything's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
it's practice. Like you just talked about those habits. If we're in that habit of automatic negative thoughts, in that habit of feeling like there's always a problem, it's going to take, are you right-handed or left-handed?
Right-handed.
So if you brush your teeth with your left hand tonight, it's going to feel weird.
So weird.
It's weird to even think about it, right?
What?
Right? That's brushing your teeth. Imagine changing your life.
Ugh.
Right? So it's going to take some practice, and you're going to want to shrink that change to small things. And yeah, it absolutely takes time and repetition and reinforcement. The other thing, like sort of the last technique I would talk about is reframing, right? And so that's a huge one, because it's not what happens to us that determines whether something is good or bad.
I have another quote.
Okay, let's hear it.
The same boiling water that softens the potato hardens the egg.
Very
Go
nice.
on.
A lot of egg themes today, like scrambled eggs, hardens the egg.
Maybe I'm wanting some eggs, like an omelet or something would be amazing.
Yeah, what was that one that was like, what's normal for the spider is chaos for the fly,
Yeah,
Yeah,
same
that's
thing.
what I heard too. So that's kind of the essence of what reframing is about. It's not what happens to us that determines whether it's our perception, it's our interpretation, right? We are guilty as charged.
Or I have a question.
Okay.
What would you do if someone was being super stubborn and they were like, yeah, well, I'm just a potato and I'm not an egg, so I'm reacting how I'm supposed to react because I'm a potato. Yeah. And I'm not going to react how the egg's going to react because...
Sure. What does it mean to be a potato?
I don't know. Like, what if they identify with in such a way, that they're like, this is what I am, this is how I'm raised. Like, people who just, that's what I am, there is no changing. I'm a potato. And then the egg's over here like, I once was a potato and now I'm an egg. You can change.
I'm lost in the metaphor a little bit. But
me too. But just go back to the first part. It's fine.
But what's interesting about that is whether you take potatoes or eggs or whatever, you say, I'm this, and that's how I'm supposed to be. And yet, you're here with a desire to change. Yet, it feels uncomfortable to be that in some way.
What if they said someone just put me in the water? And now, is that a responsibility issue? Because no one just put you anywhere, unless they're a minor.
Well, go back to our foundational concepts, right? Like one, I'm impressed that you've survived the water. Wow. Wow. Someone put you there. Right. You didn't want to be there and you're surviving. Right. You're really, in a lot of ways, thriving. How are you able to deal with that, especially when it's not where you want to be? Because now I'm already implying and recognizing that there's so many things that they're doing on their own behalf, right? And you're going to say, well, I don't like it, but I blah, 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 blah.
Despite what happened to get them there, the focus is they're there. Doesn't matter. Have to change that. Okay, cool.
And,
cool.
To tie it back into reframing, I mean, loosely there, it's like there's a little bit of victim stuff going on. It's not my fault. I've been put in there, right?
Right.
Well, the reframe would bring it into a context of basically empowerment where it's like, no, but you do have choices, right? So it's not bad that you're in the water. Some people like being in the water. Your experience, you're not enjoying it, right? But there's a lot of ways to reframe. You can reframe across time. It's not forever, right? You're just in the water now. What's it going to look like when you get out? Why do you want to get out of the water? What would you do if you were out?
I love this. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Right? Well, I would, blah, 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 blah. And I bet you on that list, there's a couple things you can just go do.
Wicked cool.
Right?
Okay.
Right?
Cool.
So you can reframe across time. It's not important. It's not forever. It's a transient situation. You can reframe in terms of severity, right? You're not always going to struggle in the same way, right? So that's where you're building up resiliencies and things like that. So I'll give you one like more specific example. A lot of times with addiction, people will come in and they'll achieve sobriety, right? But then there'll be a relapse. And they'll go, I mean, I was clean for 6 months. And then this past weekend, man, it got bad and I started using again. I failed. You know, I'm not sober anymore. I'm using, I'm high. And so typically it's let's dig into the triggers. And I'm not saying there's not value in that, but my approach would be like, hold on a second. So you're telling me that you've been clean for 180 out of the last 181 days. Wow. Like, how did you do that, right? And this guy's like, I just got my ass kicked this weekend. I've been using everything I get my hands on. I'm right back to the way that I started. Like, I failed. And it's like, dude, when you first came to treatment, if you had been clean for 180 out of every 181 days, we wouldn't have let you in. Right. You wouldn't have had an issue. So now already I want to go back and talk about the days that were working and what you were doing then. Let's just do that. Okay, going to your buddy's house and catching up, you end up using, that didn't work. Let's not do that. Right. What was working? Let's do that, right? And we shrunk the change again. And so it's really, really simple. And so you can see, like, it's not a rigid thing. So we talk about a miracle question, into coping questions, into exception questions, lots of scaling with some reframing put in there. This is a bad thing. Is it? Oh. Right? There's another side to this. There's two sides to every coin. These things are so interchangeable, and that's where the art comes in. When to say wow, when to scale them, what it means with that scale, you know, when to reframe, when to just like accept it and empower it and go, okay, well, that's just part of the story, but there's other parts of the story too. I don't hear about that. So it's, you know, when you said I'm asking for a friend, it wouldn't be bad. I mean, it wouldn't have a negative effect, but to just hammer out these techniques and just start kind of using them. But it wouldn't have the richness of with a sort of a skilled artist kind of blending this together and a little bit here, red at the right time, boom, and it pops.
Right, because you can plop the red and the blue and the green on the canvas, but if you don't mix it correctly, it's not going to look as pretty. Oh my God, that's amazing! Wow, how cool!
Well, and I'll tell you, like when people get into this, when I was in grad school and you know people were kind of studying it, it does feel like paint by numbers. You do A, then you do B, then you do C, and repeat. You know, and you're like, I don't know, it feels limiting. It's the most unlimited approach because I think it was Picasso, like you learn the rules as an amateur so that you can break them as an expert.
Oh, that's cool.
Right? And that may not be perfect, but it was something like that, you know? Or like you learn them as an amateur so you break them as a master or something like that. That's what Solution Focus is for me, is it's so flexible and you feel good. You feel good. Like I know personally, like burnout is huge in this field. When I'm doing a truly kind of solution-focused session and I stick to those principles, I don't leave feeling deflated. I leave feeling very hopeful for that person because I've spent the last hour hearing what they can do, not what they can't, and thinking, wow, if they do those things, life is going to get a little bit better for them. And I think the clients feel a lot of that too.
Oh, 100%. They must. How could they not? I mean, I just sitting here with you, I already feel uplifted. I'm like, wow, like I can fix things. This is cool. Like,
and it becomes like it all feels manageable.
Exactly, though. It's not this big, scary storm cloud that is coming no matter what, and I just don't have an umbrella anywhere, and there's nothing to hide under. Like, I feel like, okay, nope, I'm going to go find something, build something, and I'm going to weather this storm,
People are loving the eggs on the live stream, just so you know. People are like, they're going for the eggs. Like, eggs just sounded good. Like, we got to get a sponsorship or something going over like Eggland or something, it's pretty good. Happy eggs. Happy eggs. It'll go with the solution focus. Eggs.
I'm always eating eggs on the show. Just
It's the only time you can eat a whole animal at once.
you told me that, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
The health benefits.
It's all there. It's all there, nose to tail, right there. So it's good.
Like kind of cringy,
It's weird to eat a whole anything, right? Just seems cringy. Yeah, but to say that, you're eating it. No, but that's and so that's I think that's the one where you kind of got to it where like what's the best. I like using solution focus. I can use it across almost any problem situation. And I also think in traditional therapies, sometimes it's like, well, I've got things I need to process. You hear that a lot of times. It's like, till I fully process this, I can't move forward. Listen, there's real value in reprocessing, and I like a lot of that stuff, the EMDR stuff, and the idea of closure is really key out there. But life is being lived right now, and you've got to get into this, and you've got to decide like how that's going to look tomorrow. And you got to do something about tomorrow. And if I have to wait till the processing is complete, when am I allowed to start getting better?
And is there a guarantee of that completed process? And is it going to look how you want it to? And like,
not to be melodramatic, but make no mistake, some people will spend their entire life on this, healing.
Right, like trying to become like that version of themselves, that one.
They'll spend their entire life on it. I was hurt, and I will spend the rest of my life healing. And that's okay if that's part of it. But there's degrees there. You're not either healing or you're not all better or worse or bad or hurt or injured. There's variations in there. And how do you capture those positive moments? How do you appreciate? How do you know, like, I can celebrate going from a 9 to an 8 in terms of my pain scale or my depression or my anxiety? And that's a win. That's as much of a win as from going to 1 to 0. It's 10% either way, right? And so that's the thing is like we don't have to, if you think about like losing weight, people struggle with that a lot of times, right? Like it's good to have goals, but like if you want to lose 100 pounds, like you should feel pretty damn proud if you lose 10, right?
People don't look at it that way.
You're on your way.
Don't.
Like I've got 90 to go.
That's what they focus on.
I'm 90 pounds away from being allowed to feel good. And
but what about the 10?
Well, what a tragedy is that for today? So it's a life sentence. You have to feel miserable until you go all the way.
And that's how some people seem to
I felt like that before. I mean, I think everybody feels like that sometimes.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Wow. So, how long is this supposed to take? Like this whole therapy thing, like, can you do it in like a week? Can you do it obviously it's situational, but like, what would you say?
SFBT, solution focused brief therapy, right? So there's no promises, no guarantees, but you should be evaluating progress every 6 to 8 sessions.
Cool. Weekly sessions or bi-weekly?
Weekly,
sessions?
whatever.
Cool. Okay.
It's less time sensitive and more encounter sensitive. It's like dose dependent, like how many times I go in versus I've been in therapy for 6 months.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay. Yep.
But it should be evaluated. It should be evaluated of both processes, right? Both directions. So if the client is the expert, who am I asking or how am I evaluating whether or not it works? I'm asking them, is this working for you? Is it getting better? What else would you like to work on? What do you think would happen? What do you think it would look like when you were ready to go and live life on your own? What would you be doing differently then, right? What's one small step of that we can work on now? So I should be handing it back over to the client every 6 to 8 sessions going, do you want more of this? Is this working? And if it is, it should be focused. Like, what are we working on? Right? One of the things that, and this is why insurance companies really love solution focus, because one of the things you shouldn't be doing is just sitting in therapy for a year kind of aimless. Again, there's value to processing, and I like having somebody to talk to, right? And it's therapeutic to do that.
Venting is cool, totally.
And if there's benefit to you, keep rolling with it, man. But it should be because there's benefit to you, right?
And it's fixing something, right?
Yeah, I'd be very suspicious and wary of that whole, like, I don't know if you're ready yet kind of conversation, because now I've taken over. I've become the expert on your situation, What would that look like? What are your expectations of success? If it goes well, What would you be doing? What would it look like if it goes well? How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that you can do those things right now? Those are really empowering conversations. I just don't think you're ready. I just don't think you're in a good place and ready to talk to your ex yet. Do you really think that's a good idea? Do you think you should do that? Get out of here. Get out of here with that.
So I don't know. Maybe I won't. Maybe I should.
I've got parents. I don't need to pay a third one. That's fine. Thank you so much. I'm good, So, and again, there are other approaches. I mean, people are in CBT for a long time. Works great. People in person-centered. Works great. People doing specific techniques works great. So as a solution-focused practitioner, you should always be supportive and reinforcing of, hey, what works for you? Wow, working on what works. What works for you? Let's do more of that. Yeah. So I think we nailed it. I mean, is that it? Like everybody's a solution-focused practitioner.
Done.
Do you want to check it? Yeah. Did you have any other questions, or how do you feel about that? Yeah. She's scanning the thing, see if there's any questions from the audience. I don't know how long we've gone. It feels like we've gone about an hour.
Right? Yeah, it feels like an hour-ish. Let me just make sure I don't have anything else.
Producer
for
Ian
you.
charges by the second, so he's over there. Like he's got to check his meter. So he's like, no, keep going. So.
Wow, no, you mowed through that.
Yeah, well, you do anything for 15, 20 years, it becomes something you're generally comfortable talking about. So you want to wrap? Are we good here, you think?
I feel like I don't have any questions. They don't have any questions.
I mean, I would kick to you, Heather. I know before we do, I guess I'll kick to you on this. I know that you've been upfront and kind of forthcoming about, your therapeutic process and, your quest for improvement and, your processing. Does what we talked about in this last hour, does this feel like what therapy has felt like for you? Have you had experiences with this, or how, as a person who engages in therapy, does this sound like something that would work for you? Or do you feel like, well, I don't know, I would have some concerns?
I personally really like the kind of approach that you take when it comes to the whole solution-based brief therapy. I still don't know what it means.
SFBT, yeah.
It's just so refreshing and empowering to think instead of ruminating on what's happened and try to figure out the root of it and what did I do then and what am I not going to do? Why don't you just turn it around, the whole thing, all of it, flip it inside out and just start from the beginning and say, okay, well, how was that? What was going good? Just entirely flip it on its head. And it doesn't sound like the type of therapy I have ever had before. Not to say that other kinds, like you said, aren't totally helpful, because they are. It's really nice you have to start somewhere, right? You have to, maybe the other kinds are more beneficial for the beginning of reflecting on your experiences and learning how to open up about them and learning, what is a serious problem and what's not, or what's seriously cool and what's just going to go away in a little bit and you shouldn't pour all your energy into it.
For sure. Do you know what is the number one factor in determining whether somebody feels like therapy is effective for them is? Do you know what the number one thing that leads to client satisfaction with therapy and leads to real progress?
And them talking a lot? The therapist is listening?
The therapist listening. It has nothing to do with their approach.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with specific techniques. It almost is entirely driven by the connection and the relationship that you have with your therapist.
Okay. I can see that from interactions I observe between clients and therapists when they come out of the office. They're like, I love them.
I love them. Yeah, that's what they say. It's such a cool thing to hear, not because it feels good to be loved, although it does. It's just that means that bonding and that connection is happening. It's that old phrase about they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I would say for anybody who's considering therapy or engaged in therapy, be constantly evaluating your connection and your relationship with your therapist. You don't have to love them. I mean, some people have hard-ass therapists that really hold them accountable and that's what I need. I have bonded with that person on that, and that's okay. That's an amazing piece of self-awareness. Likability is part of it, but it's just, that's back to that individualized piece. That's back to the art, not the science. Somebody could do exactly what I did here today with different techniques and say the exact same things. And you may sit there and go, this guy, somebody may have done that with me. Somebody on that, you may get some feedback. This guy is an idiot. He doesn't have any clue what he is talking about. That guy shouldn't be my client, right? Because he's not going to benefit from it. I feel zero about that because it's not about me. It's about you, right?
They actually all love it. And they're very intrigued, but they love it and they're intrigued by the miracle questions.
They really liked that
Well, yeah,
part.
I think you're being very kind. So it's a miracle that they all love it, I think. So no, but that's the thing. So if you're engaging this and you're seeking services or you're engaged in services, please be empowered. Like you are in control. You can tell your therapist, like, this is not working. I'm not clicking with you. I need another therapist. I'd like to find somebody that I bond with more, that respect is kind of a fighting word. Like, I don't respect you, but it's just like the value of the relationship is going to be the primary determinant in the value of the therapeutic, outcomes. And so that's the whole thing. And then behind that, if that's in place, then now it's about, do I like the solution-focused approach? Do I like the cognitive behavior, that kind of thing? So I just like that. I always think that's interesting. Day in and day out, I look at and it comes down to, can you bond? Can you create therapeutic rapport? Do they trust you? And if those things happen, it tends to go well.
9 times out of 10, that's why I'll have to move a client to a different provider. It's nothing the provider did wrong. It's nothing that happened. It's just, could I try someone else maybe?
Absolutely.
And it's fine.
My heart always breaks when they ask that in like an apologetic way.
Mine too. I'm like, it's fine.
Like, I've been suffering through like 6 sessions with this person I don't like. Can I just try one? You're like, oh my God, you could do that anytime.
Why did you do that? Why didn't you just let me know? Like, why were you suffering?
But and we, I know with the new, just speaking specifically about us, we have all different kinds of modalities. We have all different kinds of personalities. Shop around. Nobody feels anything about that. We're very happy to, transition you to somebody else, and people have even gone back. You know what I mean? Like, well, actually, you know what? I did need what you were giving me, and I feel better about it. And now
even if I didn't like it at the time, and it maybe, gave me what I didn't want to hear, but,
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's good. Thank you so much again for coming. Heather, you drove wonderfully. This was great.
No one died. No one died.
So yeah. So, and then, like I said, for people who are listening, anybody at home, and obviously your live stream viewers, we appreciate every single one of you. If you are needing help, you can always find us at anewbh.com, ANEWBH.com. We are on Instagram. We're on Facebook as well. You can find us there. We offer in-person services. We offer psychiatric services. We offer telehealth services. We offer nursing services. We offer therapy, case management, substance abuse, mental health, and more. Yeah. We are, one of the things we're committed to as an agency is really responding to community need. So we've worked with a lot of children in this community. We've worked with, older populations, developmental disabilities, any type of mental health issue. It's really hard pressed to find something that we're not willing to engage in. So, and if it's not us, we'll find you the right place to be. So, I just appreciate you, producer Ian. Thank you so much for coming in. It sounded great. We love the lo-fi. We're working on that. It's a work in progress. And so, we'll be back. We'll be doing more of these. Like I said, the channel is going to launch. By the time you see this, the channel has launched, but we're looking at 3 or 4 sessions, and then we'll drop that in. And hopefully this is a place where you can find some encouragement, find some solutions, and keep working on what works. That's what we're all about here. So thank you so much. Until next time, take care of yourself, and definitely take care of each other. Thank you.